I am scared. This is interesting. I hate to start things with I'm afraid because I'm typically not afraid of much except failure, but I think that we're all on a road to failure. And I was reading last night. This was interesting. There's been so many things. I haven't done anything with this channel stuff in a long time for the 9 people that watch. So I'm just going to let the video be what it is with the sun coming in behind me and the glare and all this other good stuff because maybe I'll get 9 people or maybe I'll get 10 people. Anyway, but I'm scared because I was leading this thing in Popular Mechanics. I was reading about the ancient Egyptians and King Tutankhamun and all this other great stuff and how long the reigns were in Egypt and how they had an isolated society due to where the Nile was placed in the desert and how basically for 3,000 years they kind of reached an apex of their society. So they did all these great things and they had 3,000 years in which they worked and did these amazing things and were very highly functioning with math, science, medicine, things like that. And it was almost untouched because they'd reached some level of perfection within that system. And how literally today, I mean, it's kind of gone, but we still have some monuments and things of that nature. But thinking about that made me think about Rome, made me think about the ancient, Greek society, and all these other societies that have existed before us, obviously. And I was thinking about us and this thing I was reading magazines, like as far as the U.S. goes, we've only really been around for about 230 some odd years. And as far as more modern man and society, even back in Europe, it's only been a few hundred years for us more modern stuff. And as far as the Industrial Revolution goes and the computer revolution and all these other things that are going on now, that's only been like 100 years. And looking at the news and seeing things that are talking about global warming, talking about carbon footprints, we have been so detrimental to this planet. It's amazing, but now it's like we're in a position where we're all guilty of it because we all have something that comes from something that it probably shouldn't come from, or we're doing things that we shouldn't do. It's like one of those situations where the matriarch of the family worked really hard and did all these amazing things and built some amazing business, and we literally come along and get the business, get the money, and just literally squander it inside of a decade. All this work. And it's very troubling, but I realize what it's based on. And unfortunately, it's us, it's our greed, it's our narcissism, it's our creature comforts, and the thing that makes us all kind of guilty. Now, I was watching this other thing and reading about this to talk about those cobalt mines in Africa, and they got the kids going in and getting the cobalt to basically put in batteries for iPhones, put in Teslas, and all these other things. So we're all kind of guilty of it now. Because years ago, I recall back in the 90s when Kathy Lee Gifford and a couple of other famous people had clothing lines at the store Kmart, which no longer exists. All of a sudden, it came out that a lot of the clothing, were coming from sweatshops in other countries and being made by children, and talk about these bad standards. And all of a sudden, it was horrific, and they had to pull all that stuff because everybody's like, "Oh my God, what about the kids? What about the kids?" Now it's really terrible because we know exactly what's going on, whether it powers our phones, whether we're wearing makeup from someplace, and some billionaires who became a billionaire in the last year or two, all of a sudden is so cool and nice. Her stuff's coming from other places. I'm not saying it's anybody specifically, but all these things are coming from someone. There's child labor, there's modern slavery going on in the world, but no one really seems to care anymore because all of a sudden we're all guilty of buying these products and guilty of having these things. And we've actually been put in a position where, I was like, say, years ago, there were a lot of things that were luxuries that most people didn't have. I mean, you didn't need a cell phone, you didn't need a car phone, you didn't need a giant house with 20 rooms, you didn't need 15 cars, you didn't need $1 million, $2 million. It was just things like that. Taking private jets, it was only for a handful of people. Now every single body wants to be the king. You look up, all these people are somehow making all this money. The prices of real estate are skyrocketing to something astronomical where people can't even work and live in a place. Imagine living in an area, not even just an area, like almost an entire state where you work and have multiple jobs, but somehow you can't afford to live there. What is going on? And you realize it's basically just greed. We want more. There's nothing wrong with having a house. There's nothing wrong with having a car. There's nothing wrong with having a Rolex. There's nothing wrong with having two or three. But when you get to 5, 10, 15, and you want more and more and more, everyone just says more. No one's ever saying this is enough. It's like when you're a kid and you're eating and you're at the buffet or you're wherever and it's a nice situation, there's a ton of food, and you're going crazy because it's so good. Your mother, your father, somebody's going to tell you, hey, it's not going anywhere. Take your time, eat what you need to eat. It's going to be here. as far as life goes these days and money and all this other stuff, no one ever sits back and says, I'm good, I got enough. My house is okay, my cars are okay. I'm totally happy with this. Let me see if I can do something for somebody else. It's just more, more, more. Me, me, me. How many followers do I have? How much money am I making? What about me? What about me? And it is kind of a dog eat dog world, so you kind of have to have that mentality a little bit. But it's just the fact that it's just so excessive. And the problem I'm seeing that really frightens me is the fact that the kids get to see this. The kids are coming up in the world of social media and all these things, and some chick on TikTok showing her booty. Look at my booty. Look at how great it looks. Somebody, it's like, hey, this is my meal plan for the day. Like, what's going on that's good, that's helping us, and not keeping us selfish with our heads up our own butts? There's nothing, and we're just excessive, and it's more and more. So I'm basically having this conversation. I like to say sometimes just to say we're walking around with a bunch of really bad stuff in our trash bag, and it's all tied up. And unfortunately, we can't go through the bag and dig it out and make everything better. But sometimes it is nice to put that bag down, open it up, and let a little bit of that toxic stuff out, because if you don't, it's going to explode. We are up for something. I don't know what's going to happen. I hope something happens and we get good and we start to fix the things. Because if we're talking about colonizing Mars, the really super smart people that are wealthy, that makes no sense. It takes a year and a half to possibly get to Mars. And it just means that we're raping our resources. Imagine we just have a certain amount of resources, a finite amount of resources on this entire planet. And in the past 120, 150 years, whatever's gone on for thousands of years before was almost basically untouched. We are basically screwing the kitty right now. Whatever surplus we had, whatever things that were good, we are taking that at such an astronomical rate. It's staggering. So I'm not trying to tell everybody to go hop on a bus together, or people stop taking private planes every place for you and your 5 friends. Because when thousands of people start to do that, we start to have really crazy problems. Before only a few people could afford houses that were huge and big, like some sort of Vanderbilt estate. Now it's like everybody and their cousin. Not me, I don't have any money. It's buying these houses that cost 10, 20, 30, 40 million dollars, like $100 million. Where's all this money coming from? Yet we have more people that are starving. We have, or at least hungry. Obviously, you should never starve in this country. There's plenty of food, and I don't know why we don't understand that. But again, I think it's a power thing, and it's a greed thing, and it's a stepping on someone else's neck thing to say, well, we could feed a lot of people, but we choose not to, because all of a sudden it's going to devalue food, and they're going to think this stuff's free all the time, and no one's going to want to work. But sometimes I always think that's interesting, because you'll sit back with other people that sometimes study economy and study economics and things like that. And everybody always wants to tell you, even when you watch the news, the politicians tell you why certain things can't work. And no one's going to say, let's just try to redesign the whole thing and make that work. And no, well, that's impossible. Why is it impossible? All these other things that are just crazy are totally possible. We're talking about going and colonizing another planet. Apparently, that's totally fathomable. But having an irrigation system where people can have water, clean flowing water throughout Africa, throughout other areas of the country and the world, and have food and things like that for day-to-day necessities. I'm saying you ain't got to have a Bugatti and a Jacobs and Co. watch. It's just like food and shelter. We've always existed and had food and shelter, food, water, shelter. Super duper simple. But all of a sudden, we want more. We want this. I want to have this. And it's nice to have the water flowing to you, because there's no point in walking for water. I mean, that's ridiculous. I know how people do it. We are so absolutely blessed. But this was more of a conversation, because it's just like I'm frightened. Because I was watching the news also the other day, and they were talking about ExxonMobil making all this money off gas, and record-breaking profits for last quarter, last year, whatever, in the billions. And this is when everybody's paying like skyrocketing gas prices, and no one says this is a problem. They talked about it for about 30 seconds. They talked the most money that they've ever made. Then they talked about a lady who played basketball with her college team. She was a coach, and I guess she stepped in for a game. I don't think it was that important of a game, but obviously you shouldn't do that as a coach. Play with the kids, play with the college kids and try to pretend to be a student. You're scoring on everybody. They talked about that for 3.5 minutes and how wrong it is. And they talked about this company making billions and billions of dollars in profits, not just normal money that pays the employees, pays for this. Profits, extra money that goes into 10 people's pockets around the country, shareholders. It's amazing to me. We are definitely in trouble. We need to have these conversations, and we need to fix stuff. It's about a world of fairness. We need to stop doing all these crazy things. We're doing all this new building and knocking stuff over, and we're just erasing our history, because if we don't understand what our history is and embrace kind of what it is sometimes and understand where we came from, we'll never understand where we're going. So the stuff we're doing right now, it's almost null and void, and it's almost going to be more of a detriment in the future. But we don't care about that. We just care about now. So if anybody sees this, send it out to a friend. I know it's a longer message. It's something to think about. We can change things together. We have to, because we're here together. Basically, we ain't going nowhere except for death. We're going to be on this planet. Let's try to make the best of it and start cleaning some of this stuff up and doing the right things instead of the wrong things, and stop thinking about what's financially viable, okay? Because recycling apparently is not real. All right. Have a great day.